back again. Let's see if we can give a little time for everybody to find it and reconnect. Something went wrong with my network connection. My Wi-Fi signal looked fine, and I'm not sure exactly why it did that. Oh, here we got a few faces reappearing. Let's see if we can get everybody back. There we go. There's a face. I see a floating thumbs up there. Okay. Well, I don't know exactly where the Wi-Fi cut off, but what we have here is that Nebuchadnezzar, a king, probably Nebuchadnezzar the first, in my opinion, others disagree, but it is making war against the king of the Medes. And he sent out a decree to all the regions of the world contiguous with his empire that either honor me as your king or I will destroy you. And so all the way down into Egypt and Ethiopia and over to Persia and all around, all through Canaan, all through Phoenicia, the coastlands of Asia Minor, and the area around the Mediterranean there, he sent this message to. So I'll pick up in the 11th verse. It says, "But the people who lived in all those lands ignored the orders of King Nebuchadnezzar of the Assyrians. They didn't join him in the war because they weren't afraid of him and considered him to be nothing more than one man. So they sent away his messengers empty-handed and in disgrace." So here is this recently risen king of the Babylonians, actually a Babylonian extraction, who was born of an Assyrian father. I'm sorry, a Babylonian father who was a general in the army of the Assyrians. And he has conquered Assyria, and he's now making war against the Medes. And he sent out messengers to tell everybody, either honor me or I will destroy you. And everybody just seems to have laughed at him. And so in the 12th verse, it says, Nebuchadnezzar was very angry with the whole region. He swore by his throne and his kingdom that he would get revenge upon the entire region of Cilicia, Damascus, and Syria. He would kill them with his sword, as well as everyone living in Moab, including the children of Ammon, all of Judea, and everyone in Egypt, as far as the shores of the two seas. Pretty ambitious for an upstart. Pretty self-confident. In the 17th year of his rule, he marched his armies against King Arphaxad and defeated him in battle. He overpowered all of Arphaxad's armies, all of his cavalry, all of his chariots. He gained control of Arphaxad's cities, marched as far as Ecbatana, captured its towers. This is the city with the massive walls and towers that we read about. Looted the marketplace and turned its glory into disgrace. He proved to be a lot more powerful than people thought. He captured Arphaxad in the mountains of Ragau and stabbed him with spears, putting an end to him forever. Then he returned to Nineveh with all of its combined forces, a very large group of fighting men, where he and his army rested and feasted for 120 days. Chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar is going to start to plot his revenge. In the 18th year of his rule, and on the 22nd day of the first month, a discussion took place in the palace of King Nebuchadnezzar of the Assyrians about how to take revenge upon the whole region as he had promised. After calling together all his attendants and all his officials, he laid out before them his secret plan and established with his own mouth all the wickedness of the region. They determined to destroy everyone who had not obeyed his command. When he finished laying out his plan, King Nebuchadnezzar of the Assyrians called Holofernes, the general of his army and next in charge after the king himself. The king said to him, "The great king, the master of all the earth, says that you will leave my presence and take with you men who are sure of their own strength, 120,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry. You will lead them out against all the lands in the west because they disobeyed my command. You will tell the people to prepare earth and water, for I am coming out against them in my rage, and I will cover the entire earth with the feet of my army. I will hand them over as spoil. Their wounded will fill up the valleys, and every brook and river shall be filled overflowing with their dead. Then I will lead them as prisoners to the ends of the earth. You will go ahead of me to seize all of their territory. If they surrender to you, keep them for me until the day of their punishment. But show no mercy to any who continue to resist. Hand them over to be killed and plundered. Do this wherever you go. As I live and by the power of my kingdom I have spoken, and I will do this with my own hand. Now, don't neglect even one of your master's commands, but carry them out exactly as I have ordered you and without delay." So Nebuchadnezzar here is handing out threats of a magnitude that is just unimaginable for the ancient world at the time. So Holofernes, his general, left the presence of his master and called together all the leaders, captains, and commanders of the Assyrian army. He assembled the chosen men in divisions as his master commanded him, 120,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry armed with bows. He arranged them as a great army prepared for war. He also took a great many camels, donkeys, and mules to carry their baggage, and countless sheep, oxen, and goats as provisions. He took enough food for everyone, as well as a large quantity of gold and silver from the king's palace. Then he and his whole army set out ahead of King Nebuchadnezzar to cover the whole face of the earth to the west with their chariots, cavalry, and chosen infantry. Joining them was an assorted group of people, so many that they couldn't be numbered. They were like swarms of locusts, like the dust of the earth. After marching for 3 days from Nineveh to the plain of Bechteleth, they camped across from Bechteleth near the mountain to the north of Upper Cilicia. From there, Holofernes took his whole army, the infantry, the cavalry, and his chariots, and he went up into the highlands. He cut through Put and Lud, and looted all the peoples of Rasis and the Ishmaelites along the edge of the desert to the south of the Chaldeans. He traveled along the Euphrates, passing through Mesopotamia, and destroyed every strategic city along the brook of Abron until he reached the sea. He seized the territory of Cilicia, killing everyone who resisted him. Then he went to the region of Japheth to the south along the edge of Arabia. He surrounded all of the Midianites, burned their tents, and plundered their sheep pens. Then he went down into the plain of Damascus during the wheat harvest and burned all their fields, destroyed their flocks and herds, and sacked their cities. He emptied their fields and killed all their young men with the swords. This was a major tactic of the armies of Mesopotamia. The Assyrians, along with the Babylonians, was a scorched earth type of policy where not only did they kill and plunder, they left the land largely unusable and devoid of any vegetation. One of the reasons why Joel, in his prophecy, likened them to locusts, and why with the events of the fifth trumpet in the book of Revelations, that the armies of Mesopotamia are described as these demonic locusts. And described largely just like Joel describes the locust army in his book of prophecy in the Old Testament. Then he went down into the plain of Damascus during the wheat harvest and burned all their fields, destroyed their flocks and herds, and sacked their cities. He emptied their fields and killed all their young men with the sword. Fear and dread of Holofernes fell upon the people living along the seacoast, in Sidon and Tyre, and those living in Sur and Osina, those who live in Jamnia. The people who lived in Azotus and Ascalon were especially afraid of him. These are all coastal cities on the Mediterranean. So they sent messengers to Holofernes requesting peace. Look, we are the servants of the great king Nebuchadnezzar, and we present ourselves to you. Do with us whatever you think is best. Look, here are our homes and all of our property, all the wheat fields and flocks and herds. All of our tents lie before you. Do with them as you think is best. Our cities and the people who live there are your slaves. Come down and deal with them as you see fit. Coffee has arrived. Pick back up with the 6th verse. Our cities and the people who live there are your slaves. Come down and deal with them as you see fit. The men brought this message to Holofernes. Then he and his army went down to the seacoast and placed guards in strategic cities and chose men from among them to form a reserve army. Everyone in the surrounding countryside welcomed him with wreaths, dancing, and drums. Yet he still demolished all their shrines and cut down their sacred groves. He had been commanded to destroy all the gods of the land so that all the nations would worship only Nebuchadnezzar, and so that those of every language and tribe would call upon him as their God. Quite a narcissist, this Nebuchadnezzar. Wants to be the God of the whole world and its ruler. In verse 9, it says, Then Holofernes approached Esdraelon near Dothan, which is opposite the great ridge of Judea, and set up camp between Geba and Scythopolis. He stayed there 1 whole month, waiting for all of his army's baggage to arrive. So now